So I think what we'll do is get moving. Tonight's presentation, as you all hopefully know, is on aged care. Now, the session's going to run for about 35 minutes or so in terms of me having a bit of a chat, but there's going to be plenty of time for questions at the end. So if you've got a really burning question, you certainly can answer on the way, but perhaps hold on to any thoughts that you might have till the end, and we'll have a bit of a session towards the end of questions. As some of you who have perhaps had family members that you've had to assist into aged care will know, the aged care system is quite complex, and in particular the fee arrangements in what it's going to cost to get into aged care. It can be difficult to come to terms with just how to best structure things. One of the key issues is planning ahead and gathering your information ahead of time, and today is one of those times. Hopefully tonight we'll be able to give you some information that will help perhaps demystify some of the costs that are involved. Now, from the 1st of July 2014, the rules around aged care and the costs of entry to aged care are going to change. So you are going to have to suspend what you know around accommodation bonds and income tested fees, because that is in a month and a half applicable. As with all of our presentations, what I'm going to be talking about tonight is general advice. So if you're going to want to implement anything, please seek advice first. With our population ageing, the fee structures for aged care have had to change to ensure that the system remains, I suppose, for want of a better word, sustainable and able to meet the growing demand. As you can see here, over the next 35 years, the number of people in the over 85 age group, being the red bars, are expected to grow significantly. And this is going to place an extraordinary amount of demand on the aged care service sector. But not only that, there's still not enough places available, even today. And there's going to be a need to cater for more couples as longevity starts to impact the ability of men to actually live as long as their wives. And there's also the desire for people to stay in their own home as long as possible, and that's something that the new system does take into account. Certainly, the new system is going to result in more user pays, and the aged care services are going to be more strictly means tested, and a lot of people are going to be asked to pay more for their aged care. In essence, it's the ageing population that is driving this growing growth in fees. These figures here are based on some work done by the Productivity Commission in 2011 into the Caring for Older Australians, and it shows the likelihood of those needing care during their lifetime. And you can see here that fewer men are going to need only fewer men are likely to need care than women, and this is because generally, on average, men predecease their spouses. But having said that, if you look at this bar down the bottom here, some 44% of people aged over 65 and living alone are likely going to need to rely on the aged care system. And that's mainly due to the reduced opportunity for informal care. So currently, about 80% of care is provided by informal care, that is children, relatives, friends, and it's generally provided in the home. So, smaller families, children living and working in scattered places, and more women working continuously in the workforce. And also changing attitudes means that there's less of an opportunity for informal care to be provided. So, and that just means there's fewer carers available in that informal sector, so people are going to move towards the more formal sector for their care. So the pressure on the system is going to keep growing, and the baby boomer, as the baby boomers age, they're going to start needing additional assistance. That's going to grow the need even further. So this diagram here looks at the options available to elderly people as they move from independent living to residential care. And I think it's worth thinking about it in that continuum. It's only about 25% of people are going to need to access residential care. And so the majority of people tend to access care services in their own home, and usually up here in these top two bubbles. And the government's pretty keen about this because it costs them less. So certainly the in-home care services are something that is a growing area. So just starting at the top there, the home and community care, that provides services like Meals on Wheels, cleaning services, transport, and it's generally provided by local councils and groups like that. There's no aged care assessment required to access those services, although some councils do have someone come around and assess you for need. And that's certainly a very useful service for people to access as the first point of assistance. Next is home care packages. Now there's four different levels of packages in terms of the levels of care required. And once again, these provide a range of support services, but they're now starting to replicate the type of care that you receive in residential care. So it's starting to be a little bit higher care requirements, so things like personal care, meal preparation, registered nursing care. There's a whole range of services that can be provided through these at-home cares. Now, of course, these groups here, you will need someone wanting access to those services, particularly government subsidised services, is going to need an aged care assessment team assessment. So you'll need to be assessed as being eligible to access that care. And that is something that is worth knowing. This is only suitable for those people who want to stay in their own home. And those who want higher support, so they have higher support needs, if they still want to stay in their own home, are still going to have to look at having someone living with them to provide that care when the support services aren't there. So for those who have the means, it might mean having a 24-hour nurse, for example. We move into more the residential care arrangement. So respite care, which some of you may be familiar with, is available for elderly people who need temporary accommodation. And generally, the best example here is when, if you've got an informal carer who's perhaps looking after someone who needs care, and the informal carer needs a holiday. If the person needing care has been assessed as being eligible to access respite care, and you can book a place in an accommodation facility, pretty important to do that, because you've got to find a place that's available. Retirement villages are another permanent option in terms of moving from the home into some sort of supported accommodation. It's a low maintenance living option, and some villages do offer serviced units where there's assistance with meals and personal care, medication management, that sort of thing. Retirement villages are not government subsidised, so the fees are set commercially. One would argue they're not really all that commercial when you see some of the contracts, but the contracts are very, very complex. So I suppose the the issue to be aware of when you're looking at retirement villages is make sure you get advice around the contract you're signing. Don't be forced into it, because there's significant entry, ongoing and exit fees, and that can be they can be very, very expensive and can certainly hurt you financially if you get it wrong. It can be really hard to get your money out of a retirement village if you leave there as well. So it's just be worth knowing. Being forearmed is forewarned. And then finally, we've got permanent residential care, which is suitable for those people who can no longer live independently in their own home. And these people will need help with personal care like bathing and dressing themselves and activities of daily living, and maybe even occasional daily nursing care. So tonight, what we're going to be focusing on is predominantly this residential care, because this is where the greatest costs lie, particularly under the new regime. But before we do leap off into that, I just wanted to quickly cover off on the at-home care, because I think the reality is most people, as we heard before, are going to be accessing these types of services. So once again, to access the at-home care packages that are government subsidised, you must be you get assessed by an ACAT team and have that approved. You also need appropriate support of your family or friends. You need a network around you, because that care packages only give a certain amount of hours per week. They're heavily subsidised, these packages, but everyone will pay 7.5% of the basic single age pension, which for interest's sake is $134 a fortnight at the moment. So that's the minimum fee to access this, but keeping in mind still at home, so you've still got the normal costs of running your household and whatnot. So it's important from a cash flow management perspective to understand the costs framework there. Self-funded retirees and part pensioners will pay a higher part of their income as towards those costs, but there are caps. So $5,000 a year for part pensioners, $10,000 a year for self-funded retirees. These amounts count towards your lifetime cap of fees. Under the new regime from July, there is a lifetime cap on the amount of fees that will be charged under the means testing arrangements. So it's not all the fees, just the means testing arrangements. Currently, it's starting off at about $60,000, and it gets indexed each year. So if you went from in-home care, for example, as a self-funded retiree, and you were 6 years in using that, then that would be your $60,000 that you'll pay towards your cap. That's it. You could then continue using those home services and only pay the basic costs. So the cost of that care really drops after that 6-year period. If you moved from say at-home care into a residential facility, and then there's the means tested fees at that point, then you're looking at needing to excuse me. The means tested fee cap carries through to that new arrangement. So you've already met the $60,000 cap with your at-home care. You don't then start again with the residential care means test. So there is a bit of a concession there for those who end up in care for a lot longer than they anticipated. It's a possibility. These at-home care packages aren't necessarily the best thing for everyone. And I recently heard of someone who was already in receipt of a community care package, community care arrangements, which predominantly was help with transport to get from home to medical appointments or to the shops to do the shopping. And it was a local council arrangement, and so she had taxi vouchers. It was great. She could get to a doctor appointment, come home, not a problem. It was a great arrangement. She was assessed under an ACAT assessment as being able to access an at-home care package. That package gave her 4 hours of care per week, which was great. Help with going to do the grocery shopping, help with getting to the appointments. The problem is that the carer would turn up, drive her to the appointment, sit in the waiting room while she's in with the doctor, use up half an hour, say, come out and drive home. Well, there's perhaps an hour of the 4 hours care a week. She was using up her care arrangements in not really care situations. So you've really got to be careful when looking at these types of packages. Look at what is being offered and make an assessment as to whether it's actually going to be worthwhile to you for that person for their particular circumstances. So let's have a look at the residential care arrangements. Now, there's a lot on this slide and we're going to go through it from the left to the right. So I suppose from the outset it's important to note that from the 1st of July there's going to be no distinction between low-level care and high-level care. So what you already hear about as being low-level care, you pay a bond, high-level care, you don't pay a bond, forget it. Doesn't exist anymore. Under the new system, everyone pays a bond or an accommodation payment. The accommodation payment, in red over here, used to be what we call a bond. Those who have less than $45,000 in assets won't be required to pay a bond. An accommodation payment. Got to get out of the old language. All those who have more than $45,000 in assets will be required to either pay a lump sum or a daily care fee. Now there are, for those with low means, some assistance there, and some maximum amounts that daily accommodation payment can be. But all those fees, those accommodation payments, are published on each facility's website and also on the government website, myagedcare.gov.au. So if you're interested in having a look at what sort of accommodation payments are sort of sitting at the moment, myagedcare.gov.au is a good place to have a look at. Now, ranking those facilities from least expensive to most expensive, then starting at the top of the list, is probably not the best way to choose your facility. There are a lot of other factors that need to be taken into account other than just how much is that accommodation payment. We'll have a little bit more look at that later. The basic daily care fee in green here, everyone pays. It's 85% of the single age pension, which is $46.50 a day, and that's indexed as the pensions rise. And that just goes towards your living costs. The means tested fee, which is in purple here, that's those with high levels of assets and income will pay this fee, and it's only going to, and it'll apply to part pensioners and self-funded retirees. It may apply to those who are on the full pension who own their own home and are entering care, depending on what they do with the house. We'll have a look at that as well. There's a fee on that, a cap on that fee, a maximum amount of $73.86 per day, or about nearly $27,000 a year. However, the way that works is the means tested fee is calculated, so whatever, and there's a fairly complex calculation around that fee, and it may be more than the $73.86, it could be $100 a day. So you will pay $100 a day until you reach the annual cap, and then it will stop for the rest of the year, and then at the anniversary of you entering the facility, bang, back on again. And it's not set and forget, it is updated in relation to your means as they change over time. So it's something, it is a new arrangement, but I think the biggest issue there is cash flow. Managing the cash flow from the period you enter the facility while you're paying the means tested fee. If you are paying more than the annual amount, is more than the maximum, then at some point during that year, the means tested fee will stop and then it'll start again. So you just need to understand how that's going to impact, and that's where it becomes very particular to each individual person's financial circumstances as to, and some of the choices you can make too. This one here over here, the blue box, is the extra service fee. Now that's already in place. We're used to seeing that. You have the opportunity sometimes if you go into an aged care facility for extra services. It might be a daily newspaper slid under the door, or it might be a glass of wine with dinner, or it might be a number of other services that are additional but included in your arrangements, and they'll be listed in the contract you sign. Those fees will be set by the facility, and they should be in line with the services that are being provided. If they're not, then you probably wouldn't want to pay them. If you're going to charge you $10 a day for a newspaper that you know costs $2.50, then you probably wouldn't pay it. Typically, those fees at them will range somewhere $10 to $150 a day, depending on how swanky the place is that you're in, really. So you get a bit of choice under the new system, which is nice. Once you've been accepted, you've had a place accepted to move into a residential facility, and you've agreed what the accommodation payment's going to be, because that's already been published on the website, so you know what that's going to be. And that amount, that accommodation payment, will be quoted both as a lump sum and as a daily amount. Your lump sum is called a RAD, a refundable accommodation deposit, and your daily fee is a daily accommodation payment, which is fairly straightforward. It's just, the daily fee is simply a calculation, it's a percentage of the lump sum. You're effectively just paying interest daily on what the lump sum would have been. Currently, the interest rate is 6.63%. So the daily rate is just, if you've got a lump sum up here, you just calculate the daily fee by multiplying that by 6.63% and dividing it by 365, and you get your daily fee. So it's actually a very straightforward and transparent calculation. The resident has 28 days to make up their mind as to how they want to, whether they want to pay a lump sum, whether they want to pay a daily accommodation payment, or a combination of both. Once you've made the decision, you've got a bit of time to juggle your assets, and you've got 6 months to juggle your assets before you have to pay the lump sum. So there is time, and you don't have to rush around madly selling investments or selling properties. You do have 6 months up your sleeve. A resident can choose any combination of lump sum and daily accommodation payment, so long as they're left with at least $45,000 in assets. So you can't pay all your money into, because you have nothing left to pay the other fees and charges that apply. There's no right or wrong answer. When you're looking at this, and we'll go through an example a bit later on, each individual's circumstances are very particular, and you can't have a blanket rule when it comes to these aged care fees, unfortunately. I'd love to be able to give you a rule of thumb. I was looking for one, but there's just, the only rule of thumb I could find was that if you've got less than $150,000, you're probably going to be not paying the full daily accommodation payment because of the way the formulas work. Anyone with more than $150,000 is probably going to be looking at paying a fairly substantial amount in daily accommodation payments. The best suggestion really, in this case, is to look at getting some advice. Because as this says here, cash flow is the key. Because whilst, when that money's put into the accommodation deposit, you can't access that to fund your living costs. There is one little thing, and I wasn't going to say, but you can negotiate to pay the daily fee from your lump sum. I don't know that too many accommodation facilities would like you to do it, but you do actually have the right to negotiate that, and it may work for someone with low means or lesser means than others to perhaps look at paying a lump sum and then funding the balance of their accommodation payment by effectively drawing down on their lump sum. It'll take some pretty good negotiation to get that outcome, because I wouldn't imagine facilities would like that arrangement too So each facility has the opportunity to set their own accommodation deposit, and it's going to be influenced by a number of factors. The price of property, the area, the quality of the accommodation on offer, and there can be different accommodation deposits for different rooms in the same facility. The one with a nice outlook over the garden may have a larger accommodation deposit than the one that looks over the factory next door. That is a realistic outcome of the new arrangements. The options chosen is going to have an impact on the income that can be generated from the remaining assets. So if you're putting $500,000 into an accommodation deposit, then that's not going to be invested to provide cash flow to fund your other fees and costs of living arrangements. Just to give you a feel for sizes of bonds, this is the latest information we had, which is from 2009-10. The average lump sum paid in Australia was $232,000, but then in major cities and regional centres, the average lump sum was closer to $450,000. And there's some areas of Sydney where bonds have been of $600,000 to $800,000 have not been uncommon. So we're not talking necessarily small amounts of money. Newer facilities, or those that are in expensive property locations, are more likely to charge higher refundable accommodation deposits. Facilities who want to charge more than $550,000 as a accommodation deposit have to have approval from the government to do so. So there is a check and balance. One way to look at refundable deposits is that, a bit like buying a home, the price of the house is based on property values in the area, the amenity of the property, and buying the property gives the owners the right to live in that property while they're there, and whilst they're living in it, the money's locked up inside the property, which is very similar to a refundable accommodation deposit. It's safe, so refundable accommodation deposits are government guaranteed. And all of that money is returned to the resident when they leave that facility. Or it goes to their estate.
No interest on it?
The facility
Is there a time limit before it is refundable?
No, when you leave. So it'll either be paid to your estate, or it'll be paid to you within the time frame under the contract you signed when you enter the facility. It's not like a retirement village where you've got to wait 15 years to get the money back though. One of the key advantages that the RADs offer is that they're exempt from the age pension test. So whilst you can't necessarily use them like we used to use bonds to reduce assessable assets so that we can not pay we can pay lesser fees, that doesn't work anymore because of the means testing arrangements, but it does potentially allow us to access some pension. So there may be some planning opportunities there. But it can also be helpful for some people who might be getting pressured by their family to release some of their assets to the next generation. And it might be a way of saying, well, I'm sorry, but I've had to pay this accommodation deposit, so I've got no money left to give you. So daily care fees, as I've said, you've got the basic daily care fee which everyone pays. And that's indexed every March and September when the pension rates change. For many people, that's cheaper than living in their own home. Residents who have higher assets or income are going to pay a higher fee towards the cost of their care, and for every $1 extra they pay, the government pays $1 less. So you can see why the government's pretty keen for people to have these assets. There is a complicated formula to work this out, and I can attest to that. It is not it's a 12-step process to calculate this fee. It's one component's based on your assets, and another component's based on your income, and combined, we get what the fee's going to be. As I said earlier, there's an annual limit of $25,000 a year, although with indexation, it's going to be closer to $27,000 a year. So these rules have been coming for about 2 years now. So the figures that we've got in legislation are about 2 years old. So the indexation that's going to occur, which hasn't been released yet, mind you, is we're going to see it up around $27,000 as an annual cap. Then you've got the lifetime limit, as I said earlier, of $60,000, which also will be indexed. So it might be closer to 70. Your house. A person's home is a pretty important asset. When you're moving into care, the house then becomes available to pay for aged care costs. Unless, of course, a spouse still lives in the house or another protected person. Now, there's some strict rules around who a protected person is, and it's very much someone who's been caring for that person and needs to live in that property on an ongoing basis. So it's a very limited scope for someone to be classified as a protected person. The value does count when we're looking at determining how much an accommodation payment someone can afford. So when we're talking about that $45,000 limit, someone must be left with $45,000. The house is included in that asset test there. So you might not have 45 grand in cash or investments, but if you've got $1 million home, you've got the assets. You can see where this is going. Once you move into care, then the impact of the home, or what you do with the home, needs to be determined based on your aged care fees, but also on the pension. And that really depends on what you do with the home and how you structure it. I'm going to go through that in a bit more detail. But with your daily care fees, if you sell a house, 100% of the proceeds are going to be counted as an asset. If you retain the house and perhaps rent it out to help pay for the fees, then only about $155,000 is counted. So there may be an opportunity to perhaps structure your affairs in such a way that you can perhaps reduce your costs. But it does depend on how things are structured. So let's have a look at that. We've got someone who lives in a house worth $600,000, and if she kept the house, then she's not, when we're looking at the means tested fee, only $155,000 is going to be counted. If she sells the house, it's all going to be counted. So immediately we've got a difference between $600,000 and $155,000. So if we sell the house, obviously we're going to pay more in fees. It's a fairly straightforward arrangement. Let's say Alice has another $400,000 in investments or superannuation, whatever it is, and she's found a facility. The bond is at $450,000. It's got an extra care facility for the papers and a few other things that $20 a day. And so she's got a choice. She could sell her house and pay the whole refundable accommodation deposit with the proceeds, and move into the care with about $550,000 of assets left over. Or she could perhaps part pay, say, I don't know, $300,000 of the deposit and keep her house, rent it out, help fund the fee costs, and that's just two possibilities. There's any possibility in between paying the full accommodation deposit and paying $1 of it. So it's a very wide range. So if we have a look at the outcomes there, under the option 1, her means tested fee is about $97.26 a day, or $35,500 a year. So that's included in this annual aged care fee here. So the issue there is that there's going to be a shortfall of about $50,000, $51,000 a year. Keeping in mind she's got $550,000 left over from the sale of her house to help fund that. Now, within about 2 and a bit years, she's going to reach the maximum amount of fee, her lifetime fee cap, and her means tested fee will drop to 0. She'll still have the other costs, and they'll total about $24,500 a year. So and her age pension will likely increase because she's got less assets because she's had to pay 60 grand in fee costs. So there's going to be a situation at some point down the track where she'll be in a position where her income will likely meet her fee costs, but not in the initial first few years while she's having to pay the full means tested fee. And of course, at a $35,000 a year means tested fee, she'll pay that for part of the year, then it'll stop, and then she'll go along at the lower amount of payments until she hits her anniversary. Then she'll be paying her means tested fee again until she hits the annual cap again. So it's just something to keep in mind. Under the second option, she rents her house out and only pays $300,000 of the deposit, so she's got $100,000 worth of cash left over from her investments, and her fee, she's saving, what's that, $7,000 on her fees, straight up, and because the deposit's not counted as an asset, and because she's paying a daily accommodation charge now, where she wasn't under the old fees because she paid the full rate, but now she's paying a daily fee for her accommodation, the house is not counted as an asset for age pension purposes, and the rent's not counted as an asset, as an income. So she's now entitled to the full age pension. So under that scenario, her cash flow shortfall is only $500,000 a year, which she'll easily be able to meet from her $100,000 that she's still got left in the bank. So there's now a pretty good situation. It'll take a little longer for Alice to get to the point where she gets it to her lifetime cap of $60,000. But once again, once she gets there, her fees are going to drop down to about $34,000 a year, which will easily be met by the combination of these two here. So structuring and getting advice around how to, what's the optimum situation for a client, that is crucial from our perspective. I think if you know someone who's considering moving into aged care, then certainly the thing they do need to do is at least get an assessment of what is optimum for their particular situation. Now, it is easy to be shocked by the size of those accommodation bonds. If you were, I quoted $600,000, $800,000 for Sydney. I guarantee you there's probably some facilities in Melbourne that will have similar fees and accommodation deposits. But really, the important thing is finding the right facility for that particular person. It could take a few turns of this circle. But once you've found a facility that's affordable, that it's good value for money, and then we can look at the different ways to structure assets to help fund that particular scenario. The range of decisions that have to be looked at is quite wide. You've got your accommodation fees on the left-hand side there. Do you pay lump sum, daily, or a combination of the both? Do you keep the home or do you sell it? What does the family think about that? What do you think about that? Could you bear someone living in your house when you're no longer there? What are the financial implications of that decision? From an asset perspective, from a cash flow perspective. What is the impact on all those other strategies you've got going on? Your account-based pensions, your trusts, bonds, any gifts that you want to give away to people. And what's the estate planning implications of your decisions? What does it mean for those that you'll leave behind when you're no longer around? What arrangements do you have in place, and what impact on those arrangements will paying the bond have? That's particularly important for those who perhaps have structured their affairs in such a way that they actually don't have much of an asset in their own name when they die. Perhaps for reasons of avoiding conflicts, they may have put assets in other structures which therefore are not theirs when they die. a bond or accommodation payment is yours. It is in the individual's name, so it will go to their estate. So it's important to just have that consideration for if there's specific estate planning arrangements that have been put in place, taking money out of those structures to pay a bond could undo all the good work of estate planning that has been put in place. So,
this question is me parents, I'm not quite at that age yet. If you opt for the daily fee,
yes,
and 2 years down the track you're no longer there,
yes.
does the family have to pay the lump sum? So that the daily fee
It's like
just a daily fee.
So if you've got an accommodation bond, I'll do it in my head, easy for my brain, $100,000. So the current interest rate is 6.63%. So your annual the annual cost of the daily fee would be $6,630 for the year that you pay daily. So if you're there for 2 years, you pay $13,000, just over $13,000.
Plus your daily fee.
Yeah, plus all the other costs, but that's just the accommodation part of that fee. So it's just like paying interest on a loan. I think the easiest way to look at that accommodation payment, lump sum versus daily payment, is that you either give the money to the facility or there's a loan in place and you're paying them interest on a daily basis. And the rate of interest is set by the government. So it's quite a transparent arrangement, and once you leave, it stops. I think one of the big issues with aged care is that many people go into care as a result of an accident or illness, and decisions have to be made in a hurry, and generally at a time when there's a lot of anxiety felt by not only the person but also the family surrounding that person. So even under ideal circumstances, there can be waiting lists for aged care assessment team assessments, waiting lists for at-home help, and waiting lists for places in residential facilities. So even if you're really well prepared and you're planning ahead, there can be all these waiting lists. So you can imagine what it's like when someone's in hospital and the hospital's saying, we need the bed, find another place to go, and you're running around like a proverbial headless chook trying to find the closest facility where there's a place that you're prepared for that person to reside in. It can be a very, very stressful time. So take the time to plan ahead. There's a little list here that I think is pretty important. Talk to your family or people around you who are going to be potentially helping you with those decision-making or caring. Make sure that people know what it is you want to do. Do you want to stay at home? Are you quite prepared to spend every last cent but stay at home? Then that is a decision. That's a decision that you need to make known to your loved ones. We talk to our clients, of course, about the need for powers of attorney, making sure that someone can look after your financial, medical, and residential arrangements when you're no longer around, and there's 3 different powers of attorney there. Make a list so that someone can pick up your file and say, oh, okay, I know where your will is, I know where your power of attorney is, I know that I've got to call Andrew at Hewison Private Wealth to talk to him about the financial implications. So have a list of contact numbers and where documents are kept. Make sure your estate planning arrangements are in place, and make sure that the payment of an accommodation bond is not going to undo all the wonderful arrangements and clever things that your lawyer has put in place to perhaps protect the family jewels. Getting advice is really, really important in this area. So I hope this has given you some food for thought and some I suppose, information about how the new system is going to work. It is complex, particularly the calculation of the means tested fee. There isn't really a rule of thumb when it comes to the calculation of that cost. And the means tested fee does mean that all the cute strategies that we've seen in the past with trusts and bonds and all sorts of things, they no longer work. So make sure the advice that is being provided is up to date, is probably my suggestion there.
I just that earlier a lady asked whether a person in low care could go away on a holiday, and I